Hi, good morning, folks. This video is essentially serving as our introduction to English 2331 um, for the summer session um, of 2025 at University of Texas A&M University, San Antonio. All right, had to search my memory there for just a moment. Age will do that to you, I suppose. Anyway, my name is Kurt. I am the instructor for the course, and in just a moment, we're going to pop over to our syllabus and go through the syllabus, and then I'm going to take you through um, a little bit on the Blackboard site, just so you can see what's there and kind of where everything is and that sort of thing. So just sit back for the next a half hour or more, and we'll kind of get through this run through. Okay. All right. So here we have um, our syllabus. So as you can see, my name is here. This course is asynchronous, which you should all be aware of, meaning that we don't meet at any given time online. You're essentially responsible for submitting the assignments, you know, prior to the due dates, etc., right? So if you need to meet with me, this is the code for my Zoom to my virtual office. I can also, if you email me, um, we can set something up and I can send you a link to that at the time. Um, and office hours are essentially by appointment for the summer. So just you would email me, and we would figure that out. Um, okay. So my primary email address is cmeyer@tamusa.edu. Um, it also kurt.meyer@tamusa.edu goes to the same place, right? COVID-19 statement, this is standard. Uh, and we're not, coming to campus, so it's not a big deal anyway. Um, Although I would say, be safe out there. I hear there's a new variant potentially. Okay. So just be safe, take care of yourself. Right? That goes for all illnesses and so forth as well, right? Um, okay. So course objectives, if you can read through this at your leisure. Um, a lot of you are in this course because it does fulfill a language requirement and or a diversity requirement for your degree. I'm very much glad to have you. Um, this is not going to be, say, the most rigorous course as far as content, but what I hope is that it's a course that allows you to think critically, that allows you to examine literature, examine and essentially write yourselves into the stories in the sense of, creating meaning for yourselves, having allowing these stories to mean something to you in some way, right? So we'll take a look. So there is no required text per se for the class. I'm not going to have you purchase a text. All of our text materials are linked via Blackboard, either, in terms of uh, Creative Commons materials, public domain materials, fair use materials, etc. Right? So that's all linked for you via Blackboard, and we'll go to Blackboard here in a little bit, and you can take a look. But I will be sending out a fair amount of announcements, maybe one or two per week. So please check your announcements via your Tamusa email and as well as via our Blackboard site. Uh, you know, make sure that your announcements are not going to a spam folder, right? Or your clutter folder if you're using Outlook. Okay. Um, Again, if need be to discuss your projects or any other aspects of the class, you can contact me via Zoom, right? Um, this is important. I will only accept uh, PDF or docx files, not pages or Google Docs. Okay, only PDF docx. Okay. Um, your submissions need to be through uh, the Blackboard submission links, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, or via the discussion board, all of which is accessible through course content. Okay, so a whole lot of what you're going to be doing in interacting with one another, interacting with me, etc., is going to be via discussion board. Um, so your discussion board thread should be detailed and clearly address the questions being asked. Reference specifics, passages, scenes, or panels from the material, depending on what material you're discussing, right? Could be um, a traditional text, could be a video, could be a comic, etc. But it should make specific references. Um, the questions that you ask within your discussion thread and or that you answer, right, should be open-ended, not simply answered via yes or no, right? I should say the responses should be open-ended. Um, you should write your responses in minimally short paragraph, right? Um, and there are no right or wrong responses per se, but you should articulate um, your responses well, and you should support those responses, right? Give support from the text, from other material that you may bring in, etc. Um, you need to respond to at least one colleague's thread to get full credit on your discussion post. So the responses to your colleague's thread should also be, written in complete sentences as well. Okay. So you'll have, and there'll be quite a few discussion posts that we'll see here in the schedule. Okay. Um, Midterm reflection during long semester, honestly, there's a whole lot of reflections here, but this is a 5 week course, and so there's two, right? So I've sort of uh, uh, compressed the course in a lot of ways. So around week 4 or so, we'll look at the schedule, but you will, or it's not week 4, I should say week 2. I'm thinking longer term, but around week 2, right, you will create a midterm reflection, which will, at which time you will reflect upon like insights from the readings, you know, uh, uh, on your progress in the course itself, primarily your insights into the readings and so forth and whatnot. But that is a 2 page minimum reflective essay, right? Now, your literary project, you can take a lot of different pathways with this. You can write a traditional essay, which is what's described here in the description. You can also do a creative project and include with that creative project a reflexive piece that discusses how the literature is influencing the project. And there's a folder uh, on the Blackboard site that has some sample projects in it that you can look at. And then at the end of the course, towards the end of the course, you will do and this essentially functions, well, actually the second draft of um, the project functions as your final exam, but the course retrospective uh, is essentially a reflection over the second half of the course primarily, but also the course as a whole. Um, Important point, I do not drop students. Okay, so if you are going to drop the course, you need to initiate that drop yourself. Um, and it's also essentially department policy that we don't drop students. Um, what I do need is I need for you to submit your first discussion board post prior to the census date. And I believe for us that I'm asking you to submit that by June 5th, and we'll see that here in a second. Um, but I also don't assign I grades because, well, frankly, at Tamusa, the qualification to get an I is really high. It's honestly, I've taught at many universities over the years, and Tamusa has one of the highest requirements, to even be eligible for an I grade. And also, trying to complete an I for most students, particularly undergraduate students, becomes very problematic because um, it just is. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is if you run into any difficulties and so forth, I would rather you communicate with me and we figure out um, how to address that issue prior to the end of the term so that you can come out of the course with a score that you are proud of and without having to try to resort to getting an I, right? For one, at Tamusa, you have to be passing the course at the time that you request an I, right? Um, and most students who are actually passing a course don't request an I. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, I don't penalize for late work, okay, throughout most of the term. However, I will not accept late work after June 28th. Okay. So up through June 28th, you can turn in material late without penalty. That becomes problematic though, because you do need to engage in the discussion boards. You need to like I said, you need to respond to at least one person's post in addition to creating your own thread to have credit for that discussion. So keep that kind of thing in mind. Um, but if you run into a bind, do know that I'm not going to count your work late unless it's after June 28th. Okay. So here's our schedule, right? So again, in these, obviously this is a short term, so stuff kind of gets stacked. This first post here for June 5th, um, again, this is our Census Day post. This is very important for university records. Um, and here, I'm obligated by university policy. If you haven't posted anything um, by this date here, right, then I have to put you as non-attending. Um, so you want to post your discussion board post by June the 5th. Um, and of course, we have all these sort of running down. Now, these last two assignments also you cannot turn in late, right? Because they're after the uh, day that the late work is due. But essentially, what I have here, and this is in the vein of effort-based grading, right? It's not exactly effort-based grading, but it's in the vein of effort-based grading because essentially every assignment is equally weighted, right? So that the reason I did it that way is basically to your advantage. Um, Also, I'm encouraging you to take some risks with your literary project too, to kind of, think outside the box in some ways, maybe, or do something that you wouldn't normally do if it were super heavily weighted. Say, for example, if it were like half your grade or something. Um, this way, maybe you try something different. There's not as much anxiety involved in creating the project, hopefully. Okay, but we'll get more into that as we move forward. Okay. But basically your grade is out of 1,000 points. There's 10 assignments. Out of those 10 assignments, you get 1,000 points. Um, your grade is essentially a fraction, right? That's how your grade ultimately your grade is determined. Okay, so let's look. So um week one. Um Now, there's a lot of reading material um, in this course. I'm not expecting you to read everything, okay? If you look at the course schedule, it says choose between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the related material, or selections from the Ramayana and the related material. It's also asking you to review the material on deconstruction. It's asking you optionally, you can look at the selections from Genesis, right? So you have several paths that you can take with the material. I'm not asking you to read all of it. Okay, that's just completely unrealistic. Okay, but do this first week. You've got your discussion board one, where I'm essentially asking you to do a reconnaissance of the syllabus, and then I'm asking you to essentially ask any questions that you have of the syllabus, if you do have any questions, etc., and so on, right? Um, Tells you again that this is the census date assignment. Um, and then for discussion board two, this is important. You only need to respond to one of the options listed. If you look at the discussion board, which we'll get to here in a second, uh, you'll see that there are several options listed. Okay. You only need to respond to one, and then you need to respond to somebody else's thread, right? Same thing, it kind of follows the same pattern. Week two, look at the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, look at the Odyssey, if you choose to. Um, Material on Hero's Journey, and then optionally you can look at Luke and Acts. Um, Interestingly, I was under the impression that it was Luke and Acts were one text that were ultimately divided into two. Actually, scholars understand that they're by the same author, but they're actually they're two different texts. But anyway, they're uh, uh, presumed to be understood to be by the same author, right? Anyway, um, so that week we have discussion boards three and four, and we also have your um, midterm essay. Moving on, again, we have the same pattern. Uh, Asking you to review a lot of literary theory that week. Discussion board. Moving into week four. Week four, you have your first draft of your literary project due on the 28th. That's also the date that all your late work is due. If you look up previously. Okay. So then the last week, which is July 4th weekend, so you might want to plan or July 4th. I don't know what day of the week July 4th falls on, but it's July 4th, right? So you might want to plan accordingly. Um, and then this is your standard sort of boilerplate materials that you have. Now, AI, um, AI can be very useful and actually sort of generative as far as helping you come up with ideas and so on and so forth. Um, it's okay to use AI to help you come up with ideas or to answer questions like how do you correct a comma splice, for example? Very, very practical question, which AI can help you with, right? Uh, you know, um, if you run across a term in a reading, right? AI can help you define that term, for example. AI can help you sometimes with context. Uh, but what you should not use AI for is to generate your responses, right? Um, your material, the material that you turn in for the course should not be whole cloth generated by AI, right? Um, AI can be, like I said, AI can be, or like I implied, right? AI can be used for like the discovery phase, say, of a discussion course, board post, or your project where you're trying to like come up with ideas or you're trying to gather information, so on, right? But the actual project should not be generated from AI, of course. Um, this community agreement, it's based on the student code of conduct and so on and so forth. It just, and I'm particularly in an asynchronous course, I've never really had an issue, right? But it just lets you know we're going to be discussing topics that such that we might have a lot of variant views, right, about the topics. And so just as such, respect one another. And that's about it, really. For one, for example, like my points of view, I'm sure, are divergent from a number of you, and that's just to be expected. I mean, I'm of a different generation than some of you, most of you probably, had different life experiences and so on. I don't expect anyone really to agree with me. Um, if you do, that's fine. What I'm concerned with is how are you articulating, your point of view? And if you're articulating a particular point of view, what evidence are you using to support that, right? Uh, you know, um, and are you, in articulating your point of view, looking at the text or looking at the situation from a multifaceted perspective, right? So that's the kind of thing that 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 I'm interested in. Most of you know probably this by this point in your education because most of you are at least probably sophomores, if not juniors and seniors in some cases. The term liberal and liberal arts, when you talk about liberal arts education, it does not mean politically liberal. That tends to be sort of lumped in there, but that's not what it means. What it means is that you're able to um, evaluate a particular situation, a particular problem, if you will, scenario, text, so forth, from a multifaceted perspective. In other words, you look at various ways of conceiving of an idea or addressing a particular situation, and then based on the variant material, you make your decision as to how you feel about that particular piece, you're going to address that particular piece, what regardless of what subject your academic subject you're dealing with, right? And actually, that's when education actually occurs, is when you make the decision within yourself, right? Education actually occurs within. It's when you make that decision based upon the data that you've evaluated, right? And so that's what liberal arts education means. It has nothing to do um, um, in its uh, roots, right, with liberal politics. Okay, just you know, uh, a lot of people don't or haven't made that distinction, right? But there is a distinction. Um, okay. Um, okay. So this is your standard um, Tamusa stuff, right? Everybody's fairly familiar with it at this point, I'm sure. Um, various offices, and I don't know as far as the offices and so forth. I don't know their hours for the summer, to be honest with you. But if you contact these various numbers and so forth, I am quite sure that folks will be able to help you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing on on our document here, and then we're going to go to Blackboard. I'm just going to navigate through some stuff. Okay, so we're going to stop share. All right, I'm going to share our next screen, which will be our Blackboard screen. There we go. Okay, so all right, so here's our course page. This is original Blackboard as opposed to Ultra. Um, so if we go down to syllabus, right? Here's the syllabus that we have been looking at. Um, this video that I'm making right now is actually going to be located here. Right now, there's a older video listed there. Course actually opened yesterday on the 26th of May, uh, but our course doesn't actually start till the 2nd of June. So we got, so I don't expect any of you to actually have gone in here and gone through the course as of yet. But but if you look at the syllabus, so this video that I'm recording right now will be here. Okay. And I'll also send it out to you in an announcement. I don't believe in here I have it. Yeah, see, I don't have anything here. I will probably link for you. Actually, I can do that right now. Let's do a course link. So here we go. What I'm going to do is to make this easier for you. So what I just did is I created a course link to link content to course content um, because everything is essentially under course content, right? So if we look here, we have the different weeks where your materials are located, right? This mirrors the syllabus. So we click on week one. Um, got a link to the syllabus here. This folder contains the material for the Epic of Gilgamesh. So um, I highly recommend that you watch these introductory videos, for example, if you're looking to look at the Epic of Gilgamesh. These are professionally uh, produced videos, very nicely done. This is my video on the Epic of Gilgamesh. Here's the text of the Epic of Gilgamesh itself, Spark Notes on the Epic of Gilgamesh, and then Epic of Gilgamesh audio. Okay, for those like me, I'm an audio learner, oral learner for the most part, interestingly enough. So I like a lot of audio books. So I just have that there. Um, again, also for the Ramayana, um, lots of different ways of connecting with the text. Um, and anyway, here's my recap. Here's my video on the Ramayana. Okay. Um, again, the book of Genesis, right? Um, so, and then here's a um, PowerPoint about deconstruction. Again, there's material on literary theory in here, essentially to give you various lenses through which to view the text. I'm not necessarily privileging one literary theory over another, but they're there because I want you to see how literary scholars read, right? Um, and interpret text. Okay, so moving on to the discussion board, and what this does is it links us, the links us over to the discussion board. Click over here, um, and your description for the discussion board is here. Um, Tells you what to do here. You can also go over here. There is a discussions, yes, discussions area. You can click over here and it gets you there. This also gives you the description. You click on it, again, get you to this screen. You're not going to be able to see anybody else's post until you create one, right? So what you do is click create thread, and it will allow you to create a thread, and then you would submit it. Okay. It's fairly straightforward. And I'm sure that if you've taken online courses previously, you are well aware of it. Okay. Um, so that's kind of how this runs. Let me just show you in week two, because you've got your midterm essay in week two, right? So here it gives you a brief description. It tells you only .docx.pdf, right? Click it. Um, Upload files, upload your PDF or your Word document, click submit, right? That's fairly straightforward. And again, you have your due date here. Um, okay. So really my hope is that the course is fairly straightforward, um, and that there's not too many pitfalls as far as access to course material, you know, access to the various assignments and so on. Um, I will try to stay up on the discussion board posts as best I can, and I'll try to respond, at least respond to each thread as I can. Um, I will say that I got a jury summons, so I got a report for jury duty next week. No, um, yeah, I got to report to jury duty. So hopefully I won't be picked, or I will be able to get, it won't, whatever they pick me for will not take too terribly much time, because I've also got other things going on, other projects here at Tamusa. So, um, you know, so yeah, I don't want to be stuck in jury duty. Anyway, um, not that I begrudge the the jurisprudence process of jurisprudence is a very important aspect of who we are as citizens, right? And it's really a way that regular folks get to have some bearing on how everything works. But anyway, um, I hope that I don't have to serve. But anyway. All right, I'm just gonna stop this video because I'm starting to babble here a little bit, and nobody wants to go on. Nobody wants to deal with that. Okay. Anyway, if you have any questions, please reach out to me and we will go from there. Um, I hope to interact with each one of you throughout the term. And yeah, hope we're going to have a good time. All right. Thanks a lot.